Imagine finding out that the most sensitive military operation your country is planning, the kind that could mean life or death for soldiers, the kind that foreign adversaries would pay anything to know, was accidentally shared in a group chat. Not a secure government channel, a group chat. With a journalist in it. That is not a hypothetical. That is exactly what happened inside the highest levels of the United States government. And the man at the center of it all is the President of the United States himself, Donald Trump. This story is not just about a leaked message. It is about something far deeper. It is about who holds power, how that power is used, and whether the institutions designed to protect a nation are actually working. So before you form an opinion, understand what really happened here. Because the surface story is only a fraction of what this moment actually means. In March 2025, it was revealed that senior officials within the Trump administration had been communicating through the commercial messaging app Signal. That alone would not be remarkable. What made this extraordinary was who was in that conversation and what was being discussed. The group included the United States Secretary of Defense, the National Security Advisor, the Vice President, and several other top cabinet-level figures. They were discussing the specific timing, targets, and tactical details of upcoming American airstrikes in Yemen against Houthi military positions. These were not vague policy discussions. These were operational military details, the kind of information that, in the wrong hands, could get American service members killed or allow an adversary to prepare a counter-response. And then the journalist found out Jeffrey Goldberg, the editor-in-chief of The Atlantic, was somehow added to the Signal group. He was not supposed to be there. Nobody in the administration appears to have noticed until it was too late. Goldberg sat in that conversation and watched as America's top national security officials casually discussed a live military operation. He later published what he saw, and from that moment, the political and institutional earthquake began. Now, to understand why this happened, you need to understand the culture that has developed inside this particular administration. From the very beginning of Trump's return to the White House, there has been a visible tension between the traditional structures of government, the career officials, the established protocols, the layers of verification and security, and a new style of governing that prizes speed, loyalty, and informality over process. Signal was used precisely because it is fast, encrypted, and outside the formal government communication systems that create paper trails and require broader oversight. The people in that chat were not trying to leak anything. They were trying to move fast and stay outside the bureaucratic machinery they often view as slow and obstructive. But here is the problem with that logic. The security protocols that exist in the American national security apparatus were not invented to slow things down for the sake of slowing things down. They were built over decades, after real failures, after real lives were lost, after real intelligence was compromised. Every layer of verification exists because at some point in history, the absence of that layer caused a catastrophe. When those layers are bypassed, even with good intentions, even by smart people, the risk of catastrophic error increases dramatically. And in this case, that risk materialized. The deeper reason this happened goes beyond any one person's carelessness. It reflects a governing philosophy that has consistently treated institutional norms as obstacles rather than guardrails. When you build an administration around the idea that the old ways of doing things are corrupt or inefficient, you inevitably create an environment where shortcuts feel justified. And shortcuts in national security are not just embarrassing, they are dangerous. What does this mean for America and for the world? The implications operate on several levels simultaneously. First, there is the immediate credibility damage. The United States positions itself as the world's most capable military and intelligence power. Part of that positioning depends on the perception that American secrets stay secret. When a journalist accidentally ends up in a group chat discussing live airstrikes, that perception takes a serious hit. Allies who share intelligence with Washington will quietly ask themselves whether their shared secrets are safe. Adversaries in Moscow, Beijing, Tehran, and Pyongyang will take note. Not necessarily because they gained tactical information from this specific incident, but because they now have evidence that the human element inside American national security is vulnerable to basic operational failures. Second, there is the constitutional dimension. The handling of classified military information in the United States is governed by strict legal frameworks. The question of whether any laws were violated in this incident is not a partisan question. It is a legal one that will be examined and re-examined for months to come. Several legal scholars have already pointed out that the use of a commercial platform to discuss what appears to be classified operational data potentially runs afoul of federal statutes governing the handling of sensitive national defense information. Whether those laws are ultimately enforced in this political environment is a separate question, but the legal exposure is real and documented. Third, and perhaps most importantly for the long term, this incident has reignited a debate about accountability at the highest levels of government. In a functioning democracy, accountability is not supposed to be optional for the powerful. It is supposed to be the mechanism by which power is kept honest. When senior officials make mistakes that would end careers or result in prosecution for lower-ranking employees, and those officials face no meaningful consequences, the message sent throughout the entire institution is corrosive. It tells every person in government that the rules apply differently depending on where you stand in the hierarchy. That is not just a morale problem. It is a structural rot that weakens the entire system over time. The people most directly affected by this are not politicians or journalists or analysts. They are the men and women who serve in uniform. Every American service member who operates in or near a conflict zone depends on operational security as a matter of survival. When the details of a military operation are discussed carelessly, when the timing of strikes and the identification of targets flows through unsecured channels, the people most exposed to the consequences are those on the ground. They do not get to choose the communication platforms their commanders use. They do not get to audit the group chats of cabinet officials. They simply go where they are told and trust that the people above them are protecting the integrity of the mission. That trust has been shaken. Beyond the military, American intelligence professionals are watching this closely. The intelligence community relies on a culture of absolute discretion. Officers spend entire careers operating undercover, building networks, protecting sources. A single breach of operational security can unravel years of work and endanger the lives of foreign assets and intelligence partners. When they see the people at the very top of the national security structure treating operational details as casual conversation, the effect on that culture is difficult to overstate. It normalizes exactly the kind of behavior that training and protocol spend years trying to eliminate. The political impact inside the United States is also significant. For Trump's critics, this is not just another controversy to add to a long list. It is a specific, documented, nonpartisan failure that cuts through the noise of typical partisan debate. It is hard to frame the accidental inclusion of a journalist in a military planning chat as a political attack or a media invention. The journalist was there. He saw what he saw. He published what he published. The administration did not deny the core facts. What they disputed was the characterization, arguing that the information shared was not technically classified, a claim that has been contested by former senior intelligence officials who have examined the reported contents. For Trump's supporters, the reaction has largely followed a familiar pattern: deflect, minimize, and attack the messenger. The argument being made in those circles is that the media is amplifying this story because of who Trump is, and that similar or worse incidents occurred under previous administrations without comparable scrutiny. That argument, even if partially true in some historical comparisons, does not address the specific facts of this incident. It is a pivot, not a rebuttal. Looking ahead, several things are likely to unfold. Congressional oversight committees will continue pressing for full disclosure of what was discussed and who bears responsibility. The legal questions around classification and proper handling of sensitive information will not disappear quietly. And within the national security establishment, there will almost certainly be an internal reckoning, whether visible to the public or not, about how communication protocols are enforced and whether the current leadership structure is compatible with the operational security standards the military and intelligence communities depend on. There is also a geopolitical chess game playing out in the background. America's adversaries do not need to act on any single piece of intelligence to benefit from moments like this. They benefit simply by watching. Every time a crack appears in the armor of American institutional credibility, it creates space for doubt among allies, space for boldness among rivals, space for narratives that challenge American leadership of the global order. The information warfare value of this incident for adversarial state media and influence operations is enormous, and you can be certain that it is already being exploited in ways that most Americans will never see directly. There is a larger truth underneath all of this that transcends partisan politics and any single administration. Every democracy faces a fundamental tension between the desire for strong, decisive leadership and the need for institutional checks that prevent even good leaders from making catastrophic mistakes. The protocols that govern national security information exist precisely because no individual, regardless of how intelligent, how experienced, or how well-intentioned, should be the single point of failure for decisions that affect millions of lives. When those protocols are treated as optional, the entire architecture of protection that democracy has built around its most dangerous instruments of power begins to crack. What happened here was not just a mistake, it was a symptom of what occurs when the culture of accountability is replaced by the culture of loyalty, when speed is valued over security, when the feeling of doing things differently becomes indistinguishable from doing things dangerously. The real question this moment leaves hanging in the air is not who gets fired or who gets investigated. The real question is whether the institutions of American democracy are strong enough to correct themselves, or whether the corrections will only come after a failure so large that no amount of deflection can contain it. History is patient. It does not demand accountability on our schedule, but it does demand it eventually. And when it does, the record of what was known, when it was known, and what was done about it will matter more than any news cycle, any approval rating, or any political alliance formed in the comfort of a group chat that was never supposed to exist.